Amateur Traveler is in its 20th year now, but can you imagine if I had people on the show who had never been to the destination, but had just read about it or seen a movie about it? That wouldn't make any sense at all, and you wouldn't listen. We all know how important it is to receive advice from people who know a destination to get the most authentic local experience. And a great option for experiencing this is Explore Worldwide and their authentic small group adventures, led by local tour leaders, perfect for solo travelers who want to meet like minded people with a desire for adventure. I'm often an independent traveler, but two of my last three trips were with small group tours because they organize everything and it's a lot easier. If you want to recreate the tour I did to Malta, they have a Malta and Gozo Discovery Tour. I'm intrigued by one of their tours called A Taste of Sicily. The company again is Explore Worldwide, and visit exploreworldwide.com to learn more. And thanks to Explore Worldwide for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler. The nights are long, the days are short, and the weather is chilly to downright cold, depending on where you are. It's a good time to slip into a Quince iconic Mongolian cashmere sweaters, which start at only $50. You can treat yourself to everyday luxury at an affordable price with Quince. If you really want to dive into luxury, you can check out their leather handbags, washable silk shirts, and European linen sheet sets. Whatever you're looking for at Quince, all the prices are 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they do that by partnering directly with top factories and cutting out the middleman. They only work with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing processes. And of course, they use premium fabrics and finishes for that luxury feel in every piece. But you've already heard me rave about my Quince travel pants. Treat yourself this winter without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/traveler for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/traveler to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/traveler. And thanks to Quince for sponsoring this episode of Amateur Traveler.
Got my bags packed, I'm on a roll. I'm heading out there and I'm ready to go. I'm looking real good in my passport photo. Oh, no.
Amateur Traveler, episode 230. Today, the Amateur Traveler talks about brew pubs, food carts, and rain as we go to Portland, Oregon.
One more cathedral, I got to sit in one more cafe. I know that I should be heading home, but maybe not today.
Welcome to the Amateur Traveler. I'm your host, Chris Christensen. Before we go into today's interview, I do have two news stories for you. The first one, you may have caught this story about the Apple engineer who lost his iPhone in a bar because he was drinking to celebrate his 27th birthday. Well, he was drinking German beer, and Lufthansa has offered him a free trip to Germany. I know it's not their slogan, but want to get away? And then the second one is the opposite. People may not be going to Arizona. There is talk about boycotts of Arizona because of a controversial law that they're using to fight illegal immigration, where the cops can stop anyone at any time and require their papers. That's caused quite a lot of controversy, and I know in this area, for instance, San Francisco is looking at getting out of any contract they have with the state of Arizona. So stay tuned to see how that all turns out. I'd like to remind you can get a free audiobook from audible.com. I just finished reading the book Crush It. To get your free audiobook, just sign up by going to amateurtraveler.com/freebook. I'd like to welcome to the show Sean Keaner, who's coming to us from the BootsNAll Travel Network and come to talk to us about Portland, Oregon. Sean, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. I'm very excited to be here and very excited to share what I know and my take on Portland, Oregon.
And Portland is where you're living right now, although I don't think you're from there originally.
I'm not. I'm originally from Chicago. I'm actually moved across the river to Vancouver, which is the sister city.
Vancouver, Washington.
Vancouver, Washington, a few months ago. But I still consider myself based out of Portland, fly out of Portland, do all my shopping and socializing in Portland. So
okay. And one thing we should provide for our East Coast listeners especially is, how do you say the name of that state?
Well, it's supposed to be said Oregon. I know some people, like especially my buddies from Chicago, they'll say Keaner. what's going on in Oregon? So that's kind of the folks that might mispronounce it, but it's Oregon, commonly mispronounced as Oregon.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that because I know I've heard that pronunciation quite a lot, and I wanted to get the word from somebody who was living there. I haven't been to Portland since I was a kid, probably, and I remember the Science Museum there, but why should I come back to Portland? What am I missing?
Well, I'll tell you, the Science Museum you're talking about is probably OMSI on the river there. Yeah, it's still a great museum. They constantly have new exhibits and whatnot there, so I'm sure it's quite different from when you were a kid. And since I'm about to have a kid, I'm probably going to be going there.
That's right. Congratulations are in order.
Well, thanks. That's
and good luck.
Thanks. There's a lot of great reasons to come to Portland. One of the things that attracted me at first, I was a little bit younger, was there's so many microbreweries. Deschutes Brewery, which is based in Bend, but they have an outlet here now. Windmere Brewing, Rogue Brewery, Bridgeport. Those are some of the bigger names that have breweries or outlets here. And it seems like everywhere you go, you can't find a macro. At my old age, I stick with light beer these days, so I'm drinking Coors Light and Miller Lite a little bit more often to try and keep the belly small. But when I really want to enjoy beer, we have wonderful, wonderful microbreweries. So that's a reason that I think a lot of younger people definitely like and appreciate, especially from back east. When growing up in Chicago, once I hit 21, it was old style and natural light. So, wonderful, wonderful breweries out here.
And a lot of those are located downtown?
Yeah, many of them are downtown in the Pearl and downtown, yes. But every pub you go to has tons of microbeers. You're not going to see too many Bud Light and Miller Lite signs in people's windows.
Okay. And we'll get back to the Pearl, but you had a number 2.
Definitely. Number 2, I would say, is I think the access to the outdoors being so close to a city. I know a lot of cities claim that, Chris, but you really can, within one day, go skiing on Mount Hood, which is only an hour away, and you get 365 days of skiing per year in Portland. It's the only place in the lower 48 that you can ski all year round. Of course, in the summer, you got to do it in the morning before it slushes up. You're also an hour away from the coast, which is surfing and all sorts of water and coastal activities. It's definitely colder than California, but there's a lot of great surf spots provided you got a wetsuit. So in one day, you can go, and many people do this. They'll go skiing in the morning, and then surfing in the afternoon, and then they'll finish off with a wine tour in between the coast and Portland on their way back. So there's all sorts of outdoor and very close activities to Portland. Another thing that I absolutely love about Portland is Forest Park. It's one of the biggest parks inside of a city. It's up in the northwest part of the city, and they have, I don't know how many miles of trails, but I've done 15-mile trail runs inside this park. And it feels like you're in a national park, but you're in a city. So outdoor activities and access to that sort of stuff based out of Portland, to me, is just one of the best reasons to come here. And
you mentioned Mount Hood, and I'm sure that a lot of people aren't picturing what Mount Hood looks like because they're not used to the volcanoes here. Really is what they are on the west coast here. So Mount Hood is a mountain that is not really part of a mountain range per se. It's kind of standing out on its own, so it's very spectacular from that point of view, similar to Mount Rainier and also Mount St. Helens. But
that one blew its top off, of course.
A little shorter than it used to be. But
yeah, I mean, you can see these mountains from the city. So there's many parts of the city. You're driving around, walking around, you'll see Mount Hood on a clear day and even on a not so clear day. And actually, most people that fly into the city, you'll see it there on your approach and or takeoff. So it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous, big peak, typical mountain that sometimes you'll see in postcards. So yeah, it's not like this big range, but though it is, I guess, it might be considered part of the Cascades. I'm not.
I think it is technically, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
now you mentioned on a clear day.
Yeah.
You know the Portland jokes. You don't really tan in Portland, you rust.
Totally.
What is the weather really like in Portland?
Well, I came from Chicago, so when I first got out here, Chris, we're talking 12 years ago now. I've been in Oregon and 7 years in Portland. I thought it wasn't that bad. What I mean by not that bad is you don't get snow in the city. It's not that cold. And when they say rain, it's not like thunderstorms back east pouring all over you. It's kind of like the air is wet. It's drizzly a lot. There are times that it rains a bit harder, but we do get a day or two of sun, sometimes a week of sun in the middle of winter. There are times where it can be quite dark and overcast, especially November-ish to April or May-ish. Like right now, I'm looking outside my window. It is beautiful. It's got to be 65 and sunny, and it's been like that for, the past 2 days. So, and we're sitting here early April. So
Okay.
it definitely sometimes lives up to its reputation as a place that it rains a lot, but you can also get fantastic weather. One of the things I love about the summers is that there is no humidity here. Or very, very little of it. I think back east specifically when I'm going to New York this summer with everybody for the T-Bex thing, I know that it's going to be humid. As soon as you step outside,
Right.
clothes stick to you. You don't have that here, so it's very pleasant, and it's very uncommon for it to rain actually in the summer. So you'll go almost the whole summer with very, very little rain. So those are things you probably don't hear as much about.
Okay. And then you also mentioned something about Vancouver, and that tells us something about the city that a lot of people aren't necessarily picturing, which is you are a river city. You're there on the Columbia River, Vancouver, Washington being just across the river from Portland.
Yep, that's the sister city right across the river, across the Columbia. Like you said, it doesn't have as good of a reputation. It might be considered Van-Tucky, things like that. It gets called. So, there's some other terms. I don't know if I can say them on your show, Chris. It's family friendly.
We'll keep it family friendly here. Okay.
You got it. You got it, pal.
Okay, so when people come to visit you in Portland, what do you take them to see, or what do you take them to do?
Well, for me, it really depends on the person. For example, right now, I'm not even kidding. I have 2 people visiting me from Thailand. So the first thing we took them to was a yoga studio. Now, they're really into yoga, and there's a real alternative scene here in Portland, a hipster scene, you might call it. I wouldn't call myself a hipster. I'm 37 now, but people with artsy and whatnot, lots of artsy neighborhoods. And there's a vegan bar just maybe 10 blocks from my house on Alberta, which is a really popular artist kind of street that the artists come in first. It gets real hip and trendy, and then it kind of gentrifies into nicer stuff after that. But
now you see a vegan bar, so they're serving drinks that have no animals in them at all.
I guess that's what it is. I'm not really sure how it works.
So it's a bar and vegan restaurant, I assume?
Yeah, I don't know. I just know people that go there, and that's not really my scene. I'm kind of a meat eater. So,
well, Caitlin actually did ask us about a good vegetarian restaurant, so we'll put a link to that in the show notes. Then.
Yeah, perfect. No worries.
Okay. So you say that that's what you're doing with
that's what I'm doing with them. I did take them up to the mountains over the weekend just to see that. And then a lot of times during the summer, we'll do biking around the city. It's a very bike-friendly city. Lots and lots of bicycle lanes. In fact, one of my bloggers said this a few years ago. He said, Sean, I think Portland's one of the only cities that there's a bicycle traffic jam in the morning. Because the city's situated on a river, the Willamette River, actually, that runs through the middle of downtown Portland.
So that's the one that's running north-south through Portland?
You got it. There's bridges that connect the east side to the downtown. And I'm not kidding, at sometime between 8 and 9 o'clock, you will see a bicycle traffic jam. People crossing the Broadway Bridge, the Steel Bridge, the Hawthorne Bridge. And it's just hundreds of bikers commuting to work. So I think that's kind of neat.
Portland is relatively flat, as I recall, so it's amenable to biking around very easily.
Definitely in the inner bits. In Northwest, there's quite a bit of hills. Once you get out to the certain parts of the city, there will be hills, but it's not San Francisco, Chris. It's not things that you can barely walk up, let alone ride a bicycle.
Right.
So, yeah, very friendly for biking. Since the river's there in the middle, lots of people do, especially in the summer, do wakeboarding and water skiing right downtown in the middle of the city. So I don't know if I say everybody likes to do that, but that's definitely a fun thing to do in the summer on a hot summer's day, to go boating and water skiing and or wakeboarding with your friends.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've had a chance to see what the guidebooks say about Portland. Do you know what they recommend, for instance, that the locals think, I don't know why anybody goes there, or what they miss? What do the locals know that everybody else doesn't know?
Sure. It's not really a secret anymore. I feel bad bringing this up, but the food carts. We have a tremendous food cart culture here, and it's been highlighted in lots of blogs and magazines and newspapers the past year or so. But it's just a fantastic assortment of food carts throughout the city. Most of them are downtown, at least the ones that I go to. Just a week or two ago, I went to a vegetarian one called DC Vegetarian, I think is what it was called, and just fantastic. They have like steak. It's like fake steak sandwiches. And, I'm a meat eater. I thought it tasted wonderful. And this is in an area right on Washington and 4th that has just lots and lots of these food carts. So Portland's become known for food carts. I'd like to say that locals know about it and guidebooks don't. The thing is, Chris, with social media and Twitter and stuff today, it's much easier to find out about things that locals are doing than it would be several years ago.
Sure.
You can travel like a local much easier today and not even use a guidebook and find things that I might be doing on a daily basis or my group of friends or associates. So, yeah, that would definitely be one of the biggest things.
Any recommendations on where to stay?
Where to stay? I like to stay in the inner city part. Now, what I mean by that is we have a light rail streetcar that goes throughout the city. And when you're inside Zone 1, it's free. So Zone 1 would be downtown, the Lloyd Center. I think it goes into part of Northwest. So anywhere in that, when I recommend people to stay, I tell them to stay near Lloyd Center if you're looking for something cheap. For example, one of my developers is out of town, just got in yesterday, and we put him up at La Quinta. I think it's like $50-$60 a night, right near the Lloyd Center, right near the light rail, so you can get around free anywhere in the city. If you got a little bit bigger budget and you want to stay in a little bit trendier area, there's the Ace Hotel up on Burnside and 10th, which is right near the Pearl, and there's just a lot of restaurants and a few bars and kind of trendy stuff like that. And then also on the near east side, if you're a hipster, there's a place called Doug Fir and the Jupiter Hotel, which is where lots of live music acts. And these are all in the inner part of the city, but have different vibes depending on what your scene is. So Ace Hotel for trendy Pearl. Also, there's 2 hostels, I should say, one on Hawthorne, one on Gleason. And if you want a hotel, La Quinta. And then, of course, the hipster place is Jupiter Hotel near East Side, Burnside.
Okay. And then you've mentioned the Pearl now a couple times, and we haven't said what the Pearl is. That's a neighborhood.
Sure. That is a neighborhood on the near-in northwest side of the city. Like many cities in the United States 10, 15 years ago, probably closer to 15 now, it was a very industrial area. They started building condos. They started moving out the manufacturing or the industry that went on there and developing the area. And it's quite nice now. One of the parts of the Pearl that many people know that come to Portland is Powell's Books, I should say.
Oh, right.
I think it must be 11th and Burnside. It takes up a whole block, and it's definitely my favorite bookstore in the world, not just because it's in my city, but it's just a huge, huge bookstore, 3 levels, lots of coffee shops, and they encourage you to pick the books up and read as much as you want. It's got kind of that independent vibe. So lots of book signings. And
yeah, I think I've heard some people recommend it as the best independent bookstore in the country.
Yeah.
Now, there's competition, I'm sure, for that, but at least in some people's list, that's the one. So I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah, so that's definitely a great place. That's right on the edge of the Pearl. So that's definitely one of the centerpieces. And, you mentioned, where do I like to bring people? That's definitely a place that is fun to sit down for an hour or two. And you can find books that you may have been looking for a few years for just a few dollars because they're used, right? I mean, there are new books as well if you want to pay that price, but they have used books right next to it. And it's just a lot of fun, a great place to visit if it happens to be raining that day.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
If I come to Portland, what's one place? I can't really say I've been to Portland if I haven't gone to...
I'd say Powell's.
Okay.
Powell's is a very popular destination for people that want to see part of what Portland's about. I'd say a lot of the employees that work there, I'd say some of them might look a little hipsterish. So it kind of embodies a lot of different parts of Portland. Independent. We don't have a lot of Fortune 1000 companies here like Seattle and San Francisco. So, yeah, I'd say visiting Powell's would definitely... You haven't been to Portland if you haven't visited Powell's.
Okay. And I can't really understand Portland until I've done what, tried what, eaten what.
I would say if you haven't eaten at the food carts, you haven't understood Portland. If you haven't, from my perspective, it's going for a run or a walk or a hike in Forest Park.
Okay.
It's in Northwest, a little bit beyond the Pearl, not too far. It's just a beautiful, beautiful park in the middle of the city that feels like you're almost in a national park. It's that quiet.
Okay. And you mentioned side trips. You mentioned Mount Hood and then wineries nearby, as well as the coast. Any other side trips from Portland that you would recommend?
Those would be the main three. There's got to be dozens and dozens of wineries within an hour or so. So doing a wine tasting trip day, the coast is an hour, mountains are an hour. Hood River, which is also an hour away, it's right up 84 due east from the city. If you're really into outdoor activities like kayaking, windsurfing, and kiteboarding, it's considered one of the best places in North America to kite and windboard, right at Hood River on the river there, Columbia River Gorge. So lots of hiking opportunities there too. So, I mean, if you're into hiking, very close by, you can find significant hiking opportunities. Not big mountains besides Mount Hood, which is pretty significant mountain, but
when you moved to Portland, since you weren't from there originally, what surprised you?
I was in Eugene, Oregon, Chris, for 5.5 years. The growth that was happening back then, I think there still is growth, but the housing market really boomed up here, much like many other places on the West Coast. That was quite surprising to me because being in Eugene, it's a little bit slower pace, not quite as development oriented. Other things that surprised me is that even though it is a significant size city, now I know you're in the Bay Area, so that's definitely a lot bigger. I still find it's got a small town feel to it. And here's another example of that. There are virtually no strip malls inside the city. So every street has its own feel. So people really support local businesses, local restaurants, local bars. So I mentioned the Alberta district, which is in the northeast part of the city. It has its own feel. So you're not going to see lots of chains. And every neighborhood has its own bars, but without being lots of McDonald's and chain restaurants. So I think that's probably the most surprising. Like even today that I think that I love about Portland is that independent and local focus that does well in all these different neighborhoods. So
Okay.
yeah.
And getting back just for a second to food, you said you're a carnivore, and the two restaurants you've mentioned so far have been vegan and vegetarian. So where do you like to go?
I actually love vegetarian food. I do like going out for that. But where do I love going? My favorite breakfast place, and I'm not even kidding, I've been there over 300 times in the past 7 years, is called the Tin Shed. The Tin Shed is on Alberta and 13th, so it's not too far from where I used to live. They have just wonderful, wonderful potato cakes and egg breakfast. They open at 7 a.m., unlimited coffee, and it's kind of a hipster place, so I don't really fit in there too much, but I just love the food and the potato cakes. And then the other place that I love is a place called Acadia. It's on the corner of 13th and Fremont. They have a pork chop, Chris. I never really liked pork until I went to this place. I say there's two views of this pork chop. There's the Google satellite view when you look at it from the top. Then there's the Google Street View. And the Google Street View, if you were looking at me right now, is about 4.5, 5 inches tall. I mean, this is a big pork chop, and it's just so tasty. I never really liked pork chops before I went to this place, but that's the Acadia restaurant on the corner of 13th and Fremont. So those are two places that I frequent a lot.
Can you tell me one time recently, a day when you woke up and thought, thank God I live in Portland?
I would say that was today. No kidding. I usually get up really early in the morning and was having a cup of coffee and sun was coming up. And I looked at my schedule for today. Besides seeing you, I had a lunch appointment just a few miles away. And instead of driving there, I just put on my running shoes and ran there and took kind of a roundabout way to get there. Had a feed with some friends and ran back a different way. And I just was thinking, how neat is this? Because, growing up in Chicago, Chris, I think that's where a lot of my comparisons come from. Mm-hmm. It was very hard to run anywhere. I mean, you can do a 45-minute drive and still be on the north side of Chicago,
Sure.
So when a traffic jam's here there is traffic, but you can still go from one side of the city to the other in under half an hour. So these are some of the things that I appreciate. And I try to be thankful every day and live in the present like that. So it's kind of the hippie side of me, I guess.
And if I'm planning a trip to Portland, what's the one day of the year that I really should go to Portland?
The one day of the year, I would definitely say once summer has hit. So I'm thinking about the Starlight Parade. I think that's in June, right after the Rose Festival. I ran in the 10K before, but it's one of those races, kind of like, the Bay Area has one of those where everybody dresses up.
Sure. Beta breakers here. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Beta Breakers, that's what it's called. And we have one like that here. It's called the Starlight Parade. People get dressed up and there's a 10K and the weather's nice and the days are long. Being up here north of the Bay Area, I think once, let's just say the solstice, once that hits, we're talking 9:30, 10 till it gets dark. And I think everybody's energy is really high. The weather's lovely, and it's just a great time to enjoy everything that Portland has to offer. So I would definitely say that time of year, the solstice time of year, because you're going to get weather and daylight.
Okay, excellent. As we go to wind this down, if you had to summarize Portland in only 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Bike, eat, drink.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Sean. Now, we mentioned that Sean is from BootsNAll, and BootsNAll has a variety of travel sites. You can find all sorts of information. I would say probably your original BootsNAll is one of the best places to find information about round-the-world travel, for instance. So I would recommend that. And then I don't know if you've got anything else you wanted to plug, Sean.
Sure. Well, we've been around for 12 years. We're 13 people all over the United States and the world that we just love connecting with travelers. That's why we started BootsNAll. My favorite part of travel, Chris, is connecting with people, whether it's locals or travelers. So being able to talk to you today and, visiting with my friends from Thailand, that's what travel's about with me. It's about the people. So if that's what's important to you, maybe you'll enjoy some of our sites at BootsNAll.
Excellent. Sean, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Cheers. Thank you, Chris.
And look forward to seeing you at TBEX.
Can't wait.
We're going to call BootsNAll our internet resource recommendation for this week, so I'm not going to do another one. So I'm going to move on into community news. Got an email from Chrissy who said that the amateur traveler works from work. I have heard from a number of you. One of the interesting things is how long it takes to hear from you, because how many weeks behind some of you are. And because of that, I do want to encourage you to get on the email newsletter or to follow me on Twitter or join the Facebook fan page, because sometimes we'll have timely news that I'm trying to get out, such as a last-minute meetup when I'm traveling to a particular area. So if you're on that, then I can get you news more quickly. So I'm wondering, for instance, about doing meetups potentially in Austria and New York City and Miami and possibly the Bahamas, because I might be traveling to all 4 of those places in June. So if you're interested, drop me an email at host@amateurtraveler.com. I am told there's an update to the Amateur Traveler app. That's the iPhone app, that it now has episode search to make it easier to find a particular episode. You can also star and download particular episodes that are your favorites, and it downloads and loads quicker. So if you're interested, check out that, amateurtraveler.com/iPhone. And then I didn't give the address for the newsletter, but that again is amateurtraveler.com/newsletter. I try to make that easy, folks. With that, we're going to wrap up this show because I've got an early start tomorrow morning. If you want to contact me, again, host@amateurtraveler.com, or the Twitter address amateurtraveler or Chris2X, depending on how much information you're looking for. And the Amateur Traveler is part of the Travelcast network. And I'm still hoping more of you will sign up for the Egypt photo tour in November. Again, better do that quickly if you want to do the cruise. It might already be too late. amateurtraveler.com/tours. And thanks so much for listening.
I got to see one more cathedral. I got to sit in one more cafe.